So this fly that we're going to tie is a copper john, and we could tie a traditional copper john, but I thought it might be more interesting if we tie in a two-tone pattern here. So we're starting off with a black or gunmetal tungsten bead head. That's an 1/8 inch on a size 12 nymph hook, and to that I'm going to add just maybe 5 wraps of lead to give it additional weight. You don't want to get too heavy on this because what I don't want it to do is affect my taper, so add enough weight so that it helps it get down, but I don't want to affect the taper, and everything that you put underneath this fly is going to be magnified when you start to wrap the wire on top. So once I feel comfortable that that lead is on and secure, pushed up into the bead head, I can attach my thread, and this I'm using an ADOT black. And I'll just get that good and secure with wraps. I can break off the excess. And then I'll just start making my wraps. And what I do is I wrap this all the way down past the hook shank. So some of this thread is going to be exposed, and that's by design. If you want to make that almost a bit of a hot spot, you can make this thread a different color, and it's going to stick out like a tail. So then I put a little thread ball here towards the back of the fly, and the reason I do that is when I tie in my goose biots, I want to make sure that they split apart, and so they'll have a natural curve to it, and they'll want to separate. But I want to make sure that I help them get good and spread out in that tail section. So then I'll take 2 goose biots, and this I'm going to use black goose biots for it. And I'm just going to pull off 2, cut them off here. Now when the goose biots are first cut out, they want to lay in the same direction, so I snip them off, and they want to have the same curve to them. So you take them apart and you flip them upside down, and so now they want to curve in opposite directions. So that's what the tail section is going to look like. So you can tie these in one at a time, or if you're comfortable, you can tie them in 2 at a time. And I want it to be just a little shorter than a hook shank's length. So I'll just set them right behind that thread ball that I made and do 2 wraps nice and secure. And at this point then, if you want to reposition the tail, now's your chance to do so. And then I'll finish off by making more secure wraps to make sure they're not going anywhere. And then once they're in, you can just snip off those trailing sections. Then I'll bring that right back to where the lead ends, and now I'm going to start to tie in my colors. And for this, I'm going to use both medium red and medium black, and I want these to be the same length. So I'm going to take a section of them off the spool, and I'm going to use my wire cutters and cut off maybe a 4-inch section, just to make sure that I don't run out. So I've got my 2 sections of wire, and again they're about the same length. I want to get 2 of the tips, or take the 2 tips and line them up. So line up the 2 tips, and then I'll tie this in directly behind that lead. And just like with any thread body or wire bodies, you want to make sure that you're following the contour of the hook. So get those wires as straight as you can get them to tie in. And the reason why I don't tie it to the lead side is it's going to add too much bulk. Since this is kind of a void already of space, I can fill that in with the copper wire. Then I can start to advance my thread. Now, I like to put in a taper. Any blotches or any high spots that you have underneath is going to show up when you start wrapping your wire. So I take the extra time and try to get this as smooth underneath as I can, because again, everything will be magnified once you start wrapping that wire. So once I'm comfortable with the taper and how that looks, then I can start to wrap this wire. So I hold the two strands together, and it's just a wrap just like anything else, but now you're doing it with two different colors. So I'll take one over, and now since the red is the closest one to me, I want to make sure that the black comes right beside it. Red is the closest one to me, so then the black goes right beside it. Get these wraps nice and close to one another. The tendency is the wires are going to want to twist together and get out of sequence, so just make sure that you readjust every time you pull them over, and it'll start to align with the alternating colors. And here's the taper point, so now it'll start to add just slightly more volume up. And I'll take that all the way to the top. So that's probably a pretty good tie-in point. So I'll just hold that wire up, and you can see I took probably 2 flies worth of material. A couple wraps in front, a couple wraps behind, and then I'll take these, separate them, and individually just start to spin those off. And with those removed, now I can take wraps back. Alright, so now I've got the lead body in place, and you can see how that looks. Nice uniform turns. For my back that I like to use for a flashback, I take the, if I can find it here, I like to use the black flashback, but it almost has a green or kind of a pearl look to it. And I'll cut out maybe a 1/8 or 1/4 inch section, depending on the size of the fly that you're tying. So I've got my section of flashback that I'll use, and I'll bring it to a point so that I have a good tie-in spot. And I want to make sure that that lays nice over top. Take a couple of wraps. I always try to extend my body further than what I'm actually going to use, so that when I tie material over it, I give it another point where I can get it nice and secure. So now with the back tied in, I can finish off with the thorax, and for this I use a peacock herl. So I'm going to take 2 strands of peacock herl, and I'm going to trim up the ends. So trim up my ends, and I can tie that in just behind the bead, and then take that all the way back. And you can see my thorax section is in width is just a bit bigger than a bead head in terms of its width. So now that I have that secure, I can start taking these wraps of peacock herl up to the front. And tie that in there. Wraps ahead and behind. And when that's in how I'd like it, I can trim off that peacock herl, and if you want it to lie flatter, you can also take off some of this top portion so it lies a bit flatter. So for the legs that I use, I really like using a a soft hackle hen. So I'll take off one feather that I'm going to use for my leg section. So I've got my feather, and then I'll just start to clean it off. Don't need to get real particular with this. And then I'll take the tip, I'll pull the fibers back and away, and this is going to be the section that I cut off. So I've got that tip cleaned back and away. I'm going to just snip that off. And now what happens when I fold this back, it creates that void. And that's what I'm going to use to put in on either side of my bead head. So slide that on top, and I'll pinch it down. And I do this before I put this flashback on, because then I can hide any loose fibers when I put that flashback over top. So situate that right on top, and take a wrap or two, and then you can let it go. Let that bobbin hang. Now you can start to adjust your legs and start to move those around, and really have a lot of time to play with this until you're happy with it. If you feel like it's longer than you like, you can just pull out this feather and it'll start to shorten this leg. You can do even just one at a time depending on the angle that you pull. So if I'm confident or happy with those legs, I can come back in then and just start to trim this up. Pull that back to make it cleaner. Alright, now I can just start messing with the legs and just getting them just the way I want them to sit. And then I can take that flashback, pull it straight over top, and do a wrap or two on top, pull it back, do a wrap or two underneath, and now I can whip finish this. And I can trim off that end, and I can take the flashback here and finish trimming that off. And now again, you still have a chance to get the wings to sit, or the legs to sit just how you want them to. And when I'm happy with the way that everything is, then I can put a coat of head cement. And I use Loon's hard head cement anytime I'm coating a back. So I just want to take a dab of this. I'm going to hold the wings down, and then I'm just going to apply a section of that. I'm going to take more. So hold the wings down, dab that to protect the shell back. You can spruce up the tails if you'd like. And that's it. We can come back and focus here. That is a two-tone copper gem.